Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutade Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. While in Houston before coming here, we've been reading from Bhagavatam, verses connected with Lord Ramachandra. We completed Canto 9, Chapter 10. We're now reading Canto 9, Chapter 11. And the situation is Ram is back in Ayodhya. He's become anointed as the king with the full enthusiasm of Bharata. And he's been ruling for some time, and he goes incognito throughout the kingdom, and he hears this conversation by a low-class man. Speaking to his unchaste wife, the man said, "You go to another man's house, and therefore you are unchaste and polluted. I shall not maintain you any more. A henpecked husband, like Lord Rama, may accept a wife like Sita, who went to another man's house, but I am not henpecked like him, and therefore I shall not accept you again." Shukadeva Goswami said, "Men with a poor fund of knowledge and a heinous character speak nonsensically. Fearing such rascals, Lord Ramachandra abandoned his wife Sita Devi, although she was pregnant. Thus Sita Devi went to the ashram of Valmiki." So we had some discussion in Houston. I don't know if we need to repeat it. What was the reason for Lord Ramachandra doing like that? Because he knew and that Sita was not polluted, and that she already proved her purity before everybody, and so there was no question. So since there was no question, why did he go along with this? And I'll just repeat. Two things, at least. One, a lesson that an elevated person will forego their own happiness in favor of the happiness of others, and the protection of his citizens was more important to him than his own happiness. Being with Sita was everything for him, so it was not easy, but he did, because that's an ideal person. The ideal king forgoes his own happiness in favor of the happiness and well-being of those who he's protecting. And the other major reason, and there's multiple other reasons, but his having the opportunity to experience Vipralambha Bhav, or love and separation, which happened earlier too by Sita being kidnapped. Love and separation intensifies the loving relationship. And it's part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's Leelas, that love in meeting and love in separation are both there. So it was a Leela for him and for Sita to experience, as well as there's many corollary. How did Lakshman feel about that? So the churning of the emotion, transcendental emotion of Lakshmana was part of the whole situation. The dearmost to Lord Ramachandra, his dear brother and associate, also had churning of transcendental emotions. How to separate Sita from Ram if you're Lakshman? And he was being the instrument for that separation. The words that Lakshman spoke when leaving Sita are very powerful, very wonderful. So Sita Devi went to the ashram of Valmiki. When the time came, the pregnant mother Sita Devi gave birth to twin sons, later celebrated as Lava and Kusha. The ritualistic ceremonies for their birth were performed by Valmiki Muni. Oh, Maharaj Parikshit, Lord Lakshmana had 2 sons, named Angada and Chitraketu. Lord Bharata had 2 sons, named Taksha and Pushkala. Shatrughna had 2 sons, named Subahu and Shrutasena. When Lord Bharata went to conquer all directions, he had to kill many millions of Gandharvas, who are generally pretenders. Taking their wealth, he offered it to Lord Ramachandra. Oh, we read this. Shatrughna also killed a Rakshasa named Lavana, who was the son of Madhu Rakshasa. We discussed this in Houston. Thus he established in the great forest known as Madhuvan, the town known as Mathura. Mathura, the place of Krishna's birth. We discussed this. A detail we didn't discuss is that the Madhu Rakshasa was the father, Lavana was the son, but Madhu Rakshasa married one of the dynasty from Ravana's kingdom. The wife who married Madhu was kidnapped by Madhu. And at a certain point in time, Vibhishan informed Ravana, because of his nefarious activities, look what's happening. Your own relatives being kidnapped by another Rakshasa because of your nefarious activities. The lineage of demons is also counted or recounted in Ramayana. Being forsaken by her husband, Sita Devi entrusted her 2 sons in the care of Valmiki Muni. Then, meditating upon the lotus feet of Lord Ramachandra, she entered into the earth. We discussed that also. After hearing the news of Mother Sita's entering the earth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead was certainly aggrieved. Although he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, upon remembering the exalted qualities of Mother Sita, he could not check his grief in transcendental love. This is again, it's the expression or the experience and expression of transcendental emotion. What's transcendental emotion? Transcendental emotion is an emotion in relation to the absolute truth, And there's primary relationships, and there are rasas, or tastes of loving exchange, and there's secondary ones. And Lord Ramachandra is the presiding deity of the secondary rasa of sorrow. This is from Rupa Goswami's writings. Rupa Goswami. Everyone knows Rupa Goswami, right? You know who's Rupa Goswami? Rupa Goswami wrote Bhakti Rasa Amrita Sindhu, and in that Bhakti Rasa Amrita Sindhu, he describes rasa. And the rasa of love of God is a whole ocean, Sindhu. And that ocean of rasa is Amrita, it's nectar. So he very carefully goes through all the primary and secondary rasas, and they're presiding deities of each of the primary and secondary rasas. And Lord Ramachandra is the presiding deity of the rasa of sorrow. So he brings that feeling to others, and he experiences that feeling himself. Here's an example of his feeling that feeling himself. It's an ecstasy. Oh, it doesn't look like an ecstasy. It looks like our kind of sorrow. But it's an ecstasy, transcendental ecstasy. Yeah, here's Prabhupada's purport. Lord Ramachandra's grief at the news of Sita Devi's entering the earth is not to be considered material. In the spiritual world, there are also feelings of separation, but such feelings are considered spiritual bliss. Grief in separation exists even in the absolute, but such feelings of separation in the spiritual world are transcendently blissful. This is it's a puzzle that can't be understood by mundane reasoning or logic. Because sorrow is sorrow, and you feel bad, and don't try to make it look nice. Because it's not nice. Sorrow is not nice. Grief is not nice. Yet there is such a thing as intensification of love, where there's no limit to that intensification of love. It intensifies by feelings of loss. No, there's no loss, because Sita is the eternal consort of Ram. Just like, is there such a thing as sunshine without sun, or sun without sunshine? No such thing. So then what's the separation between Sita and Ram? It's a lila where the Lord is experiencing as if, or it's the transcendental feeling of grief. And he has the capacity, the potency, the potential of experiencing all emotions. And when he experiences emotions, they're transcendental. So the worldly yardsticks don't calculate properly what a transcendental emotion is. But it tends to intensification of love. We're going to, in the evening, we're going to be hearing the final 4 verses of Hanuman. You know who is Hanuman? Oh, good. Hanuman. What do you know about Hanuman? One thing that you know about Hanuman. He was a monkey. Definitely. A transcendental monkey, right? A great devotee. Transcendental monkey. So Hanuman's prayers we're going to hear this evening, and 2 verses of the remaining 4 are on this point, which is, there's no question. Boom, Hanuman saying, no question of separation between Sita and Ram. It's a Leela. Well, wait a minute. Does that mean Leela isn't fact? It's fiction or something? It's a Leela where the Lord is experiencing and Sita is experiencing and the devotees of Sita Rama are experiencing feelings. It's a pastime that stimulates feelings so that he can experience, she can experience, and their devotees can experience feelings. I know a devotee who shared with me that it's really hard for him to read Ramayana. He was living for some time in the Maryland area, and the temple that he visited was the ISKCON temple in Potomac, Maryland, where on the right side they have deities of Sita, Ram, Lakshman, and Hanuman. And he was finding it difficult to go to the temple because he'd see the deities and he'd feel sad. Because from reading Ramayana, there's so many passages that are sad. So I explained to him this topic, that Ram is the presiding deity of transcendental sorrow. And it's an ecstasy. It took a while because from our worldly sentiments and the lens through which we look at things, it's hard to grasp it. Again, sorrow is sorrow, grief is grief. No one likes it. It's not nice, it's not ecstasy. So how is it an ecstasy? Transcendental. And for that matter, how is happiness transcendental? We know what mundane happiness is. What's transcendental happiness? Transcendental happiness is the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. And being connected to that pleasure and being an instrument to help the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. That's transcendental happiness. It's beyond the mind and the senses. That's what transcendental means. There's a college student that's reading Prabhupada's books, and he sent me 2 questions yesterday. And one of them was, what's the distinction between absolute and transcendental? Absolute means that from which everything comes. That's what it's a meaning. The source of everything, that from which everything comes. See it this way or that way. But that from which everything comes, or the source of everything. Like, exactly what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Aham sarvasya prabhavo matak sarvam pravartate. That's absolute. He is the source of everything. Everything comes from me. That's what absolute means. And transcendental means that which is beyond the mind and senses, that which is of the spiritual realm. There's no touch of matter, there's no touch of karma, there's no touch of the modes of nature. That's transcendental. Now, there are terms that apply to the same realm, but they're specific terms. And transcendental emotion is beyond the capacity of our senses and mind to calculate or measure or actually understand. We get an idea. It's beyond our experience. That's what transcendental is. Beyond our worldly experience. But the Supreme Lord isn't within the scope of our worldly experience. And pure devotees similarly. So the Lord performs these pastimes so he and his devotees can experience ecstasy that by our mundane lens looks like awful. So after I explained this to this devotee, he started liking going to the Potomac Temple. And he started reading Ramayana in a different way. He said the feelings are there, but when you feel those feelings, because Ram's Leela stimulates those feelings, when you feel those feelings, it's certainly possible to connect them to the happiness of the devotees and of Lord Ramachandra. I mean, it starts with, the sorrow part starts with when he's banished. And all the persons that he goes to tell them the bad news and how they react, it's, varieties and different flavors of sorrow. And that word, at least the English translation of Valmiki Ramayana, is over and over and over and over, like sorrow, sorrow. And more sorrow and more sorrow. It doesn't stop. And then Bharata has to go through the same thing. Sorrow and sorrow and sorrow. Because Bharata means he's bearing the burden of the bad conduct of his mother. And then he's bearing the burden of the kingdom in separation from Ram. And then there's meeting. Ram comes back. Yay. Joy. That's transcendental joy. Okay. Text 17. The attraction between man and woman, or male and female, always exists everywhere, making everyone always fearful. Such feelings are present even among the controllers, like Brahma and Lord Shiva, and is the cause of fear for them. What to speak of others who are attached to household life in this material world? And naturally, in Ram's Leela, he's giving some lessons about material versus spiritual attachment. And a discerning person can understand it. Not easy to become a discerning person, but discerning persons can understand it. And those that become attached to Ram, they become discerning persons. Dadami buddhi yogam tam, yena mamupiyanti te. I don't know how a small child is soaking all this in. But transcendental. You're very patient. My compliments to you. Purport. As explained above, when the feelings of love and transcendental bliss from the spiritual world are perverted and reflected in this material world, they are certainly the cause of bondage. As long as men feel attracted to women in this material world and women feel attracted to men, the bondage of repeated birth and death will continue. But in the spiritual world, there is no fear of birth and death. Such feelings of separation are the cause of transcendental bliss. In the absolute reality, there's that absolute word again. In the absolute reality, there are varieties of feeling, but all of them are of the same quality of transcendental bliss. So we may not be there yet, we're not there yet, but we can get a glimpse of what transcendental life is and the transcendental bliss of transcendental life. It's full of variety. It's not a homogeneous smoothie. It's full of variety. Just listening to this morning, just listening to Prabhupada speaking in Hyderabad, 1975, and he was explaining, apparently there was somebody in the audience that was favoring it's all one. So Prabhupada, I was very interested. He was using the teaching of Ramanujacharya to address it, and he was speaking Vishishta Advaita. Vishishta means attributes. He was using the word specific or specification. Within the Advaita, the absolute, non-dual supreme, there are attributes. And it was, a Vaishnava will never say the soul and the supreme are the same. The soul and the supreme are the same. Vaishnava will never say that. Qualitatively, Advaita. Specifics, distinct. The soul is not the supreme. Qualitative oneness, quantitative difference. I found it interesting. He repeated it like 4 times. Vishishta Advaita. I don't know why he was using that, because that's not the disciplic line that Prabhupada is the representative of. Lord Prabhupada is the representative of Achintya, Beda, Abeda. Achintya, Beda, Abeda Tattva. Simultaneously one and different. He was emphasizing the difference. For some reason, perhaps the audience, and that I couldn't understand what the responding person was saying. They were arguing oneness, and Prabhupada was saying oneness, and specifics that are different. So that's here also. After Mother Sita entered the earth, Lord Ramachandra observed complete celibacy and performed an uninterrupted Agnihotra Yajna for 13,000 years. 13,000 years. Of course, this presentation in the Bhagavatam slightly differs from Valmiki Ramayana, which is okay because there's variety in the Lord's pastimes from yuge, from age to age. After completing the sacrifice, Lord Ramachandra, whose lotus feet were sometimes pierced by thorns when he lived in Dandakaranya, placed those lotus feet in the hearts of those who always think of him. Then he entered his own abode, the Vaikuntha planet beyond the Brahmajyoti. Purport. And this is it for this morning. The lotus feet of the Lord are always a subject matter for meditation for devotees. Sometimes, when Lord Ramachandra wandered in the forest of Dandakaranya, thorns pricked his lotus feet. The devotees, upon thinking of this, would faint. The Lord does not feel pain or pleasure from any action or reaction of this material world, but the devotees cannot tolerate even the pricking of the Lord's lotus feet by a thorn. This was the attitude of the gopis when they thought of Krishna wandering in the forest with pebbles and grains of sand pricking his lotus feet. This tribulation in the heart of the devotee cannot be understood by karmis, gyanis, or yogis. The devotees who could not tolerate even thinking of the Lord's lotus feet being pricked by a thorn were again put into tribulation by thinking of the Lord's disappearance, for the Lord had to return to his abode after finishing his pastimes in this material world. Paragraph. The word Atma Jyoti is significant. The Brahma Jyoti, which is greatly appreciated by the Gyanis, or monistic philosophers who desire to enter it for liberation, is nothing but the rays of the Lord's body. And then he quotes a verse from Brahma Samhita. Yasya prabha prabhavato jagadanda koti svashesha vasudadi vivoti bhinnam tad brahma nishkalam anantam ashesha bhotam govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is endowed with great power. The glowing effulgence of his transcendental form is the impersonal Brahman, which is absolute. There's the word absolute again. Complete and unlimited, and which displays the varieties of countless planets with their different opulences in millions and millions of universes. The Brahmajyoti is the beginning of the spiritual world, and beyond the Brahmajyoti are the Vaikuntha planets. In other words, the Brahmajyoti stays outside the Vaikuntha planets, just as the sunshine stays outside the sun. To enter the sun planet, one must go through the sunshine. Similarly, when the Lord or his devotees enter the Vaikuntha planets, they go through the Brahmajyoti. We have that experience, or the account when the sons of a Brahmana in Dwarka were disappearing right after their birth. So he started criticizing Krishna. What kind of protector are you? A Brahmana has sons and his sons keep disappearing. What kind of protector are you? And Arjuna was visiting in Dwarka at the time he heard the talk. He went to the Brahmin and said, I protect you. When your son is born, please tell me that he's going to be born. please call me and I'll protect you. So he was called. Arjuna, through his mystic power of firing arrows, made a covering over the Brahmana's residence that was impenetrable. The child was born and then disappeared. Not died, he just, poof, disappeared. And the Brahmana shook his finger at Arjuna. What kind of promise are you? You're like Krishna. So Arjuna, I'll find your son or I'll give up my life. He couldn't find his son. He was prepared to give up his life. Krishna stopped him. What are you doing? Building a funeral pyre here. He said, I know where your son is. I'll take you there. So they went through the entire universe, through the coverings of the universe, into the Brahma Jyoti, very bright. He had to wear sunglasses that squint because it was so glaringly bright, and entered the abode of Mahavishnu. Because Mahavishnu was the one who had taken the sons. And Krishna knew. And Mahavishnu said, I didn't get a chance to see you, so I knew you would come. So I'm the one that took, here are the sons back. So the Brahma Jyoti precedes the abode of the Supreme Lord. That's the point. To enter the sun planet, one must go through the sunshine. Similarly, when the Lord or his devotees enter the Vaikuntha planets, they go through the Brahma Jyoti. The Gyanis, or monistic philosophers, because of their impersonal conception of the Lord, cannot enter the Vaikuntha planets, but they also cannot stay eternally in the Brahma Jyoti. Thus, after some time, they fall again to this material world. Aruya Krishna Parampadam Tata Patantyado Nadrida Yushmarangrayaha. The Vaikuntha planets are covered by the Brahma Jyoti, and therefore one cannot properly understand what those Vaikuntha planets are, and thus one is a pure devotee. And if one has the association of a pure devotee, then one can become a pure devotee. And Prabhupada's purports are helping us get there. It's 8 o'clock. So I think I'm going to end and see if there's some discussion. It's a little abrupt, but I want to say one additional thing. Many of you like reading Prabhupada's books, I'm sure. And of those books of Srila Prabhupada that are considered 4 essential books, one is Sri Ishopanishad. And there's a verse in Sri Ishopanishad that says, Hiranmayena patrenya satyasya pihitam mukham Hiranmaya. The dazzling effulgence, the Brahma Jyoti. Please remove this Hiranmaya so I can see your mukha, your face. That's the devotee praying to the Supreme Lord, beyond the Brahma Jyoti, I wish to see your form. And because of that desire to see the form of the Lord, he reveals his form. And if one doesn't have the desire to see the form of the Lord, but rather speaks against the form of the Lord, he doesn't show his form. He is very kind. He'll reciprocate with the regard that one has for him. Yayatam mam prapadyante. Tangs tadaiva bhajamyaham. Bhajami, according to their regard for him, their worship of him, he reveals. So let's see if there's some discussion.
Devotees online, please raise your hand if you have any questions.
I've learned to be very patient, so I'll just sit here for a little while until somebody wants to say something.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances.
The sound is a little funny. Can you want to adjust some dial so the sound isn't funny? Speak.
Oh, okay. Speak like this. Okay. Hare Krishna. Is it okay, Maharaj?
It's a little funny.
Okay. Oh, echo is coming, right?
No, take the mic a little further from your mouth.
Okay.
Let's see what that happens.
Hare Krishna. Is it better?
Speak.
Hare Krishna.
No, just say your question. Come
Yeah, okay. Okay. So, Maharaj, we are talking about transcendental bliss as well as, sorrow as well as the happiness. Both are transcendental. So, for the pleasure of Krishna only, right? So, how is both are pleasurable to Krishna, Maharaj?
How are they not? It's the connection that makes the pleasure. And the connection of love has variety. There's the reflection in this world of love. And there's the love of the spiritual world, that both of which have their variety. The happiness of this world is a lure, because it's temporary. It's a lure to go further in the realm of forgetfulness, as is unhappiness, further is forgetfulness. And in transcendence, the varieties of love are strengthening the connection between the object of love and the beloved, or the lover, subject and object. Because the nature of the object is ananda, it's transcendental bliss. And there's varieties of that connection. The response rests upon the nature of the object of love. The body is not transcendental. The Supreme Soul is transcendental. And there is, in Queen Kunti's prayers, there's a very nice answer to the question, is it possible to have a transcendental relationship soul to soul? A transcendental love between soul and another soul? And the answer is yes, with the via medium of Super Soul. That's in Kunti's prayers. So transcendental happiness and transcendental sorrow are to be understood in terms of the object of the object of love, the object of one's emotion. There's subject and object, just like in grammar. There's subject and object. And it's in Rupa Goswami's teachings, but subject, ashraya and vishaya. The object and the subject. And the Lord is the ashraya, and we're the subject. And we are experiencing things. When the Lord is, because the object is ananda, satchit ananda vigraha, then those emotions in relation to the object are transcendental. Varieties of. Okay?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much for gracing us with your blissful presence. Related question, Maharaj. I'm trying to think, when we have enough of sorrows, drama and tragedy in our life.
Yeah.
So when we go to spiritual scriptures, especially my favorite is Ramji.
Yes?
The disappearance of Sita Maya and Ramji from the earth is something when I read Ramayana, I try to skip it fast. So I always ask why there is sorrow, tragedy and drama.
Why?
Yes.
Why? What's the question?
Why this sorrow, tragedy, and drama that Supreme is enacting as pastimes on the earth? Is there a lesson for us?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely. I've been trying to speak about it. I'll say it some more. Don't go away. Don't go away. You like Bhagavad Gita, right? What's the first instruction that Krishna gives to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita? The temporary nature of things of this world. Because he's lamenting and resisting the position of service. So to remove or the obstacle of resisting service, the affinity for the temporary has to be addressed. Matra sparshastu kaunteya chitoshna sukha dukkada agama payo nityas tang satiksha sabharata. The happiness and distress, honor and dishonor, winter and summer season, they're all of the nature of things that are temporary. So, Arjuna, let go of that affinity for the temporary. Recognize it, the temporary, and it's temporary. And so as you're going towards transcendence, you neutralize that affinity, withdraw affinity from the temporary, and invest affinity for transcendence. Withdraw from asat and invest in sat. So, is there a lesson in what Ram is demonstrating by sorrow? Yes. There's transcendental. Because in the spiritual realm, there's variety. It's not homogeneous blur. It's not the Brahmajyoti. On the other side of the Brahmajyoti, there's variety. And in that realm of variety, there's transcendental variety. Not just transcendental blur. Beyond the blur is, or the Brahmajyoti is Vaikuntha. In Vaikuntha, there is emotion. Transcendental emotion. And it's both sides. There's the joy, and there's the sorrow. And they're both transcendental emotions. So the lesson is, if you don't want spiritual happiness, then don't read Ramayana. Because you'll find about transcendental happiness, and accompanying transcendental happiness is its counterpart, another kind of transcendental ecstasy. So the lesson is, in the spiritual realm, there's variegatedness. But in that variegatedness, in the transcendental realm, there's everything's fixed upon the Supreme. And once that starts to sink in, then the mystery that you just expressed becomes joyful. I mean, here's one that I used to think about from time to time. How could Ram, being omniscient, leave Ayodhya, knowing what's going to happen with his father? He was so attached to upholding the word of his father. By doing so, his father was going to depart this world. And when he came to hear from Bharat that his father had departed this world, he was overcome with grief. And he went to the river and performed his duties, and he didn't get the opportunity to perform the funeral for his father, which was, important to him. But he got to perform for Jatayu. It's a mystery because he knew, but it's a pastime because he also knew what would happen with Sita by sending Sita, etc., etc. It's pastime to teach us there in transcend. So for this world, because in the spiritual world there's no birth and death, but it's a Leela in which there's birth and death. And how does the transcendentalist experience it? The transcendental emotion may look like the worldly one, but it's not. So the lesson, which was your question, is there is such a thing as transcendental happiness, and there is such a thing as transcendental sorrow. And that's replete in Ramayana, or the personality of Godhead's pastimes. His pastimes are to teach us how to deal with the temporary, same as Bhagavad Gita. Withdraw from the temporary, invest in the eternal. It doesn't mean that when you're reading Sita's departure, you don't feel sadness. When you read Ram's departure, you don't feel sadness. But it's a transcendental sadness, to the degree that the connection with the object is intact. It's not about me, it's about the supreme enjoyer enjoying a pastime of separation. They're eternally connected. That's Hanuman's lesson from this evening. Absolutely no question. He understands it. And he's helping us understand it, and Ramayana is also to help us understand transcendental emotion, distinct from worldly kind. And it's easy to get them mixed up, especially when we have a bodily conception of who I am. It's easy to get them mixed up. The lesson is to go to transcendence. That's the lesson. Someone else, you have something.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, I'm not very clear on subject and object, so I'm just going to confirm my understanding here. Is the subject the Lord and the object is what we experience like bliss?
No. The subject is you and Krishna is the object. The Sanskrit terms are ashraya, so that's easy, right? Ashraya, shelter. That's the object. He's the abode of love, the ashraya. And then there's the one who loves the object of love. That's the subject. Just like in grammar. Subject, object. And then there's a verb. There may be some adjectives and adverbs, but that's, grammar. That same terminology is in the science of rasa, where there's the object of love, and the subject, one who's experiencing that love. Now, the rasa can be, and commonly is described in terms of the jiva, where the Lord is the object. But the Lord also reciprocates in kind with the love of the subject, and the subject becomes the object of his love, because it's an exchange. But so the science of rasa is in terms of us loving the object of love, object and subject. If you have problem with the grammatical terminology, don't worry about it. It's the beloved and the one who loves the beloved.
I think it's a great opportunity to have you to clarify some of those, Maharaj.
Okay.
Maharaj, one more thing. As you were explaining the transcendental, the difference between absolute and transcendental, that was very helpful. But a question came in my mind that could we experience transcendental love with our spouse
Yes.
and our kids?
Yes. I answered that already.
As part of Kunti's prayer.
Yes, that's how I answered it.
Thank you, Maharaj.
There's the material and there's the spiritual element of spouse, and children. And largely in conditioned life, it's on the material side. And where the opportunity that we have is to elevate in relation to the supreme side. And then it's a transcendental emotion to the degree that it's connected to the supreme. It's a transcendental emotion. Take pure devotees, for example. Pure devotees have that transcendental emotion because it's in relation to the supreme. And the followers of transcendental life abide by worldly convention, but it's not the worldly convention makes transcendental life. Worldly convention is worldly convention. I'm thinking specifically of the arrangement that was there for Krishna. Who is the author of Gita Govinda? Jayadev. You know the story of the marriage with Jayadev and his wife? His wife's name was, I think, Padmavati. Padmavati? So, listen. Don't write, listen. Jayadev was living in Puri, and he was very content living a solitary life. A grihastha had a daughter, and he brought the daughter to Puri and offered his daughter to Lord Jagannath that you please give some indication who my daughter should marry, who is qualified. And I forget there's some detail, a dream or something like that. And he was instructed that your daughter should be given in marriage to Jayadev. So he found out who Jayadev is, and he brought his daughter to Jayadev and said, please accept my daughter in marriage. And he said, I have no attraction to becoming married. You can engage your daughter in being married to whoever you like. And the father of Padmavati, hearing this, just turned and left. There's his daughter standing before Jayadev. And Jayadev said to her, straightforward, you may go wherever you like, and I'll give you my blessing to go wherever you like. And she started to cry and said, Jagannath has instructed that I should marry you, and if you can't accept that arrangement of Jagannath, then I'll have to give up my life. And she didn't cry, she just stated it matter-of-factly, and he understood. So this is a convention, although it's connected to transcendence with Jagannath. And so he accepted. And in the course of her life, she was absolutely the word absolute again, absolutely faithful to her husband. There's some stories about how that happened. I mean, to demonstrate her absolute faithfulness to her husband. There was one queen who doubted. There's some detail. So the queen decided to test Padmavati, and she told Padmavati that your husband died, on some occasion. And Padmavati fell to the ground and symptoms of life were left her body. And the queen panicked. And so they brought someone to to inform her that your husband is still alive, and she came back to life. Transcendentally attached, not materially attached. It's not, that's an extreme or highly elevated, not to be imitated, but there is such a thing. And that's not just like, Krishna's eternal associates, Draupadi and the Pandavas and eternal associates of the Lord, Queen Kunti, etc., etc. But it's possible. And as we approach that connection, using the word connection multiple times this morning, yoga, union between the subject and object, then there can be transcendental affection amongst family members to the degree that connection is vibrant and real, palpable. And, so we're not there yet. So what do? We cultivate our Krishna consciousness so that transcendentalizes our relationships with not just family members, but everybody. Okay? Hare Krishna. Something online.
Online. Amrita Mataji, can you please unmute? Last.
Yes, Prabhu. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Great class. I had a question. Maybe you have already answered this in previous questions, but like when we are in sorrow, how should we act or think so that we can attain that transcendental devotion or bhakti? It is very hard when we are in that condition.
Say it in reverse. When we're going through a struggling, difficult time, how do we maintain transcendence? That's your question?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. The answer, short answer is the process of Krishna consciousness. By proper application of eternal principles in good association, then the coverings become removed and the awakening of our dormant Krishna consciousness becomes manifest. And it's generally a gradual process. So you continue the proper application of the principles of bhakti in good association, and you'll gradually work your way in the direction that you're asking. Until then, we're advised to tolerate the circumstance and the feelings connected to the circumstance that are troubling. And it's not like, you're the only one. We all have troubling circumstances and emotions connected to those troubling circumstances. So we're all getting the same challenge and the same opportunity and the same answer. Attachment to the object of love through the process of bhakti. Then everything takes its proper place. Something else?
Online question. So, even though Ram show eternal pastimes, still deserting Sita Mata, who is pregnant, is still making sad. When we get married, we promise in front of Agni, husband will protect wife till end of life, but here the promise was broken. How do we understand this?
Well, we should not imitate the past. First of all, we should not imitate the pastimes of the Supreme Lord. It's not that for the men who are attending, that if there's some challenge out there in gossip land about your wife, that you tell your wife, go to the forest, get out of town. It's not we imitate. We take vows and we abide by vows. We don't imitate. We abide by vows we keep. Now, your question specifically is, how can Ram, having taken a vow, break his vow? Because he upheld the word of his father, what to speak of his own word. And he is a man of virtue, so how could he do anything other than abide by virtue, which is abide by his vow? Now, I don't know what the vow of marriage that Ram took with Sita, you're saying till the end of life. I question, is that the vow that one takes? Because what about the Vedic system? What about the Vedic system of when the sons are of age, that the husband then takes sannyas? Now, Okay, being protected by the sons. So Sita was protected by her sons. The sons were provided, and the sons would protect her. Now that's on the Vedic Dharma platform, and then there's the transcendental platform. What's the transcendental platform say? There's no question. Ask Hanuman. There's no question of separation. There's no question of separation. Is there a question of sunshine being separated from the sun? No question. No, it's not possible. So the behavior of Ram was a transcendental behavior where he is experiencing love and separation. And this particular pastime was to experience that transcendental separation, although they're eternally connected. So I'm questioning the premise of your question, or the premise of the statement with the question. I vow that I will protect my wife for life. No, did he fail to protect his wife? He's the personality of Godhead. He can do everything remote control, no problem. He's transcendental. He can protect although remote. And what does protection mean? That's another question. There's the worldly conception and there's this transcendental conception. And she was protected. She was anyway, even in a worldly sense, she was protected. What to speak of a transcendental sense, protected. But there's this not to be speculated upon transcendental experience of loving exchange between both of them. She didn't feel spiteful. She was accepting. This is my Lord's arrangement. She wasn't unprotected because of her disposition, and she was protected. So those are some answers to that thoughtful question. One more.
2 online question and 1 in person.
Okay, and then we're going to end because it's already 8:30.
Okay, Guru Maharaj. The question is, in 4 dhams in North, all are North India, all are related to Vishnu, but South is Shiva temple. How to understand this?
I don't know this detail. I'm sorry, I can't answer that question.
Okay. Next online question. When we do service by associating with the devotees, sometimes sorrows come. How to transcend this? And
Sometimes what comes?
sorrow.
Sorrow.
How to transcend this and stay focused?
Well,
on
the
our
same
service?
question was asked before. So what's the other question?
In room.
Aha.
Hare Krishna Ji Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much for the beautiful class, and thank you so much for blessing us. My question is, so when I go to temple, especially Vrindavan temple or any temple, when I see to Krishna, I started crying.
You do what?
I started crying when I see Krishna.
Why?
I don't know. I think that he's looking beautiful. I don't know why I should be happy, right? But I start crying.
Well, crying doesn't, there's different kinds of crying.
Mm-hmm.
There's crying in joy.
Yeah.
There's not only the other kind of crying.
But I should be happy, right?
You do what?
I should be happy, right, after seeing Krishna ji?
Well, when you're crying, seeing the deity doesn't mean you're sad. That's my answer to your response, if I've understood your question correctly.
Mm-hmm.
When tears come to the eyes, it doesn't mean sad. It means emotions are churning. And this is, if you want to understand it like really deeply, read Nectar Devotion.
Okay.
And it's described very, there's hot tears and cold tears and this and that. It's the science of emotion. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. We're not so elevated like
Yes.
these exalted devotees, but nonetheless, they're symptoms. So when you see the deity and you start to cry, that's a symptom of something. Something's being churned inside. It doesn't mean sorrow or sadness or you stub your toe and so it hurts and so you cry or something. It's another kind of emotion.
Yeah, that I can feel. It's just that when I see Krishnji is looking so beautiful, Radharani is looking so beautiful, I should be happy.
Fantastic. You're fortunate. Don't stop complaining. Not that you're complaining.
Yeah.
That's it?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. You're fantastic.